A narcissist shows their true weakness only after losing control. They lash out, play the victim, or attempt desperate manipulation when they feel powerless. This is one of the most revealing truths about their nature because for so long they have lived behind a mask of dominance, charm, or false superiority. When things are going their way, when people are still under their influence, they appear untouchable, almost as if nothing can shatter their composure. But the moment control slips from their hands, the moment someone resists their grip, or the moment their tactics no longer work, their carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. And in that crumbling, their defeat becomes obvious. It is then that their true fragility is exposed, because what they fear most is not rejection or even exposure. It is the loss of control over another person's mind, emotions, and choices. A defeated narcissist reveals themselves in dramatic ways, and it is in these reactions that you begin to see who they truly are. They may lash out with anger, throwing insults, accusations, or threats, as if by force they can still bend reality to their will. This is not strength, it is desperation. The louder they shout, the more you can see the panic rising in them. Because deep down, they know their power has slipped, and they are trying to scramble for whatever scraps of control they can still cling to. That rage is not dominance, it is the tantrum of a child who has been told no for the first time in their life. And you, by no longer feeding into their game, have shown them the one thing they cannot stand, that their control over you is gone. Another way they expose their defeat is by playing the victim. This may shock you because often narcissists are the ones who appear most confident, most self-sufficient, and most in control. Yet when they feel the walls closing in, they suddenly collapse into a role of helplessness, pain, and suffering. They will try to make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. They will rewrite the story, casting you as the villain and themselves as the misunderstood victim of cruelty or abandonment. But make no mistake, this is not real vulnerability. This is performance. It is an act meant to pull you back into their cycle of manipulation, an act to make you doubt yourself, and an act to keep you entangled in their drama. True vulnerability requires humility and accountability, but a narcissist's version of victimhood is only a tactic of last resort when all else has failed. Then comes the desperate manipulation, the last weapon in their arsenal. When rage does not work, when victimhood does not work, they turn to desperation. They may beg, promise change, cry, or suddenly become affectionate in ways they never were before. They may shower you with compliments, attention, or gifts. This is often called hoovering, because like a vacuum, they are trying to suck you back into their world. They sense you slipping away, and their fear of abandonment drives them to do whatever it takes to regain a foothold in your life. But notice something. Where was this affection when you were under their control? Where was this love, this attention, this care when you needed it? It wasn't there because they didn't feel the need to provide it. Now that they are defeated, now that they are losing what they thought they owned, suddenly they bring out all the gestures of care they never showed before. It is not genuine love, it is survival. When you see a narcissist in this defeated state, what you are really seeing is the truth. Their entire image, their entire power, their entire manipulation was never strength. It was only control. And control only works when people comply, when people accept the lies, when people play their game. Once you withdraw from the game, once you stop responding the way they want, once you take your power back, the narcissist's empire falls apart. Their kingdom was built on illusions, and when you no longer participate in the illusion, it all collapses. That collapse is what creates the anger, the victimhood, and the desperate manipulation you see in them. It is important to understand this because when you encounter this defeated side of a narcissist, you might be tempted to feel pity, guilt, or even responsibility for their suffering. You might wonder if you are being too harsh, too cold, or too unforgiving. But remind yourself of this truth. They are not suffering because you hurt them. They are suffering because they lost control. They are not panicking because they love you so deeply. They are panicking because they can no longer use you as their supply. This is not about your cruelty, it is about their defeat. And by understanding this, you protect yourself from falling back into their cycle. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse struggle at this stage because the defeated narcissist can appear so different from the dominant one they knew. They may cry, they may appear broken, and they may suddenly act like the person you always wished they could be. But this is the trap. If you let sympathy override your wisdom, you risk getting pulled back into the very cycle that damaged you in the first place. You must remember that real change is not born out of desperation. It is born out of accountability, humility, and long-term effort. A narcissist rarely demonstrates these qualities because they require surrendering their false sense of superiority. What they show instead is a temporary performance designed to buy time and re-establish control. To stand firm in these moments requires deep clarity about who you are and what you deserve. You are not responsible for fixing a narcissist's brokenness. You are not obligated to soothe their wounds, especially when those wounds were created by their own behavior. You are not required to sacrifice your peace just to calm their chaos. Recognize their defeat for what it is, a confirmation that your strength has disrupted their illusion of power. The fact that they are lashing out, playing the victim, or begging for another chance means you have stepped into your power. It means you are no longer bound by their control. It means their strategies no longer define your worth. There is a powerful lesson here about human behavior and relationships. When people are truly strong, they don't need to dominate others, manipulate them, or control their lives. True strength is secure, stable, and generous. True strength can love without needing to own. True strength can let go without seeking revenge. The narcissist reveals the opposite. They reveal that what they called strength was only a mask, and without control, they crumble. They reveal that their superiority was only a disguise for deep insecurity. And in defeat, all their illusions come crashing down, leaving behind only their fear of being exposed for who they really are. The more you recognize this, the freer you become. You stop seeing their outbursts as power, and you start seeing them as panic. You stop seeing their manipulation as intelligence, and you start seeing it as desperation. You stop seeing their victimhood as vulnerability, and you start seeing it as performance. This shift in perception is everything, because it means they can no longer deceive you. You no longer interpret their behavior as strength. You see it for the weakness it really is, and in doing so, you reclaim your freedom. But freedom is not just about walking away from them, it is about walking into yourself. It is about reclaiming the power that was always yours, the dignity they tried to strip from you, and the confidence they worked so hard to shatter. Their defeat does not just reveal their weakness, it reveals your strength. Every time they lash out and you refuse to react, you prove your strength. Every time they play the victim and you refuse to fall into guilt, you prove your strength. Every time they beg for another chance and you hold your boundaries, you prove your strength. Their defeat becomes your victory, because their collapse is proof that you are no longer trapped in their cycle. It is not easy to stand in this kind of strength, because everything in you may want to comfort them, forgive them, or give them one more chance. But healing requires discernment. Healing requires recognizing that not all tears are sincere, not all apologies are real, and not all promises are kept. Healing requires choosing yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels unfamiliar, and even when it makes others accuse you of being cold. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not heartless. You are healed. You are not cruel. You are courageous. And this courage is what separates you from the defeated narcissist, because while they scramble to regain control, you are learning to live free without needing to control or be controlled. Their defeat will always feel dramatic because narcissists thrive on drama. They want you to feel like walking away is the end of the world, that your refusal to submit has caused unbearable suffering. But this is an illusion meant to draw you back in. The truth is, their world is collapsing not because you destroyed it, but because it was built on lies. You simply stopped feeding the illusion, and without your energy, the illusion died. That is not cruelty. That is truth. So when you see a narcissist lashing out, when you see them play the victim, when you see them beg and plead with desperation, recognize it as a sign. Not a sign that you need to go back, but a sign that you have won. You broke free from their grip. You took your power back. You exposed their weakness. And most importantly, you reminded yourself of who you truly are, someone who cannot be defined by their manipulation, someone who cannot be destroyed by their control, and someone who is stronger than their illusions. This is the moment you rise. This is the moment you breathe. This is the moment you claim your healing. Because a defeated narcissist may act in desperate ways, but their defeat is not your burden. It is your liberation. Their downfall is the evidence of your breakthrough. Their weakness is the mirror reflecting your strength. And in that truth, you walk forward free, knowing that the chains they tried to place on you are broken forever. Their behavior after defeat is not a sign of strength, but of exposure. The mask slips, and the fragile ego behind the facade is revealed. When a narcissist is cornered, when their usual tricks of manipulation, charm, and intimidation no longer work, what you begin to witness is not power, but vulnerability disguised as rage, blame, or desperation. They cannot accept the idea that their carefully constructed image has cracked, so they scramble, they lash out, and they attempt to distort the truth. But beneath it all, what is revealed is not someone strong, but someone terrified of being seen for who they really are. Their false confidence, their grandiose self, their exaggerated superiority, it all collapses like a house of cards when defeat stares them in the face. What many people fail to understand is that the narcissist's entire existence is built on illusion. They create a mask, a facade of strength, control, and dominance, convincing the world and themselves that they are untouchable. But when defeat comes, when someone resists their manipulation, or when life exposes their lies, the mask cannot hold anymore. In that moment, their fragile ego is exposed like glass shattering under pressure. They may scream, they may smear your name, they may play the victim, but none of these actions are signs of real power. They are signals of collapse. They are the cries of someone who has lost their grip on the false identity they depended on for survival. In defeat, their patterns become painfully clear. Instead of handling setbacks with maturity, they regress into tantrums that resemble a child denied attention. The mask of sophistication or authority falls away, and what emerges is desperation. They may accuse you of betrayal when in reality, they betrayed you all along. They may suddenly beg for sympathy, framing themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, or unfairly judged. These theatrics are not demonstrations of resilience. They are confessions of weakness. They cannot stand alone without manipulation, and so their behavior after defeat reveals the truth. They were never as powerful as they appeared. Exposure is the narcissist's greatest fear. Defeat strips them of their camouflage and forces them into a spotlight they cannot control. When the mask slips, others finally see the inconsistencies between their words and their actions, between their promises and their betrayals. That exposure is devastating to them because their survival depends on convincing others to buy into their illusion. Once the illusion is broken, they no longer hold the same power. And so, their frantic attempts to regain control are not victories. They are evidence that control has been lost. When they can no longer manipulate the narrative, they begin to unravel. The fragile ego behind the facade has always been there, hidden in the shadows of arrogance and domination. Their cruelty, their belittling words, their games, they were never born from strength, but from insecurity. The narcissist must dominate others because deep down they are terrified of being dominated themselves. They must belittle others because secretly they cannot bear to confront their own inadequacy. And when defeat finally exposes this truth, it terrifies them. The arrogance is stripped away, and what remains is a fragile being clinging desperately to an illusion that has already slipped away. Their exposure can take many forms. Some narcissists, when defeated, will rage loudly, attacking everyone around them, desperate to redirect attention from their own failure. Others will retreat into silent withdrawal, cutting off contact or disappearing, hoping the absence will create guilt or longing in those they once controlled. Still others may switch tactics entirely, suddenly begging for forgiveness, promising change, and portraying themselves as a victim of misunderstanding. But no matter the tactic, it all stems from the same truth. Defeat reveals weakness, not strength. The mask has slipped, and the desperate behavior is proof of a fragile ego finally laid bare. The important thing to recognize is that this exposure is not your burden to carry, it is their truth to face. Too often, people mistake the narcissist's post-defeat behavior as signs of strength, resilience, or unpredictability. In reality, it is predictable once you understand the pattern. When you resist their control, when you expose their lies, or when you refuse to feed their ego, their response will always reveal more about their fragility than about your worth. They were never towering giants, they were mirrors reflecting back illusions. And once those illusions break, you see who they truly are. A defeated narcissist does not inspire fear, they reveal the truth. And the truth is that their power was never genuine. It was borrowed from the people who believed in their mask, from the energy of those they manipulated, and from the silence of those who did not resist. Without that, they are left with themselves. And that is the very thing they cannot bear to face. The exposure of their fragile ego is both their greatest downfall and the greatest liberation for those who once suffered under their control. Because once the mask slips, you no longer have to doubt yourself. You can see with clarity that their cruelty was never proof of strength. It was a disguise for weakness. This revelation is where healing begins. When you witness their behavior after defeat, you finally see the contrast between the image they projected and the reality they lived. You understand that their cruelty was not because you were unworthy, but because they were fragile. Their need to control was not because they were superior, but because they feared being powerless. And once you see this truth, you stop internalizing their treatment of you. Their exposure becomes your freedom. Their collapse becomes your clarity. Their mask slipping becomes your moment of awakening. Their behavior after defeat is a mirror. It reflects not the strength they claim to possess, but the fear they desperately tried to hide. It shows you that real strength is not found in manipulation, intimidation, or false superiority. Real strength is found in humility, honesty, accountability, and love. Qualities a narcissist fears because they expose just how fragile their ego truly is. The moment of their exposure is the moment you reclaim your own power, because you no longer confuse their mask with reality, and once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. When you can identify the cycle of manipulation, the love bombing, the devaluing, the gaslighting, and finally the desperate clawing when they sense you slipping away, you begin to detach emotionally. Their words, once sharp enough to wound you, lose their sting. Their tactics, once confusing enough to keep you second-guessing yourself, now become predictable. What once seemed like an attack on your character now appears as a reflection of their fear of losing dominance. This awareness helps you understand that the chaos they create isn't a sign of their strength, but an admission of weakness. And in this awareness, you begin to reclaim your inner authority. Peace is not just the absence of conflict. It is the refusal to let someone else's storms pull you into emotional slavery. A narcissist thrives on reaction. They survive off your attention, whether it's love, anger, or even defense of yourself. The moment you stop feeding that cycle, you cut off their supply. They may rage louder, they may play the victim harder, they may even invent new tactics to drag you back into their world of dysfunction. But every time you hold firm in your boundaries, you are silently declaring that your life is no longer available for their control. You are not their source of energy anymore. You are no longer their emotional prisoner. Reclaiming your life doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of building strength where fear once lived. At first, it may feel difficult to maintain no contact or strict boundaries because the narcissist will test you. They will bait you with insults, with accusations, with pleas, or with guilt trips. They will pretend to change or act as if they finally understand, just to lure you back into the cycle. But once you understand the pattern, you also understand the danger. You see that every "I've changed" is just another mask. Every sudden act of kindness is just bait. Every victim story they tell is another hook designed to pull on your compassion. But when you rise above, you stop taking the bait. You begin to realize that your empathy should be guarded, your compassion should be reserved for those who genuinely deserve it, and your energy is too precious to be wasted on someone committed to destroying it. Reclaiming your peace also means reclaiming your identity. Narcissists are experts at rewriting your story. They want you to believe you are weak, that you are unworthy, that you are incapable of living without them. They want to diminish your confidence so that you remain dependent on their validation. But the truth is, you existed before them, and you will thrive after them. The person they tried to convince you you were is not your reality. It was a distorted reflection of their own insecurities projected onto you. The more you heal, the more you realize that their words about you were never about you. They were confessions of their own fears.